We want to get to that bit early.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Leave your job, become a self-funded searcher, and start building relationships with 150, candidate companies.
Yeah.
On the basis that maybe 20% of those might actually get to a serious discussion that meets your timeline and meets your deal structure and your sector specificity. So get to that bit. That's what we want to power search to do: is get to the fun stuff early.
Yeah. Welcome to season 2 of the Found and Funded podcast, a podcast for searchers by search experts where we explore the route to business ownership without having that $1 million idea. I'm your host, Carl Lundberg, CEO at Lender Lament and founder of the ETA Awards. Now let's get into it.
I always say the real due diligence begins the moment the SPA is dry.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, you learn about it. It's a bit like passing your driving test, isn't it? You learn to drive once you get behind the wheel.
Absolutely. And you might smash a couple of Armcos on the way down the M1.
Yeah.
But I was Captain Capital. I was out there going, I'm going to do some angel investing and buy some businesses. Big dreams and all that.
Today I'm here with Gareth Hawkins, co-founder and CEO at BizCrunch. Gareth, great to have you on the podcast. I think it'd be really good to start with just a bit of background about yourself and your story, really.
Yeah, sure. So I like to joke that I'm still on my gap between studies to become a lawyer. That gap so far has lasted 27 years.
Excellent.
I had dreams of being a barrister or QC back in the day. Did a 6-month-long pupillage. Had the audacity to apply to Trinity Hall and, perky, plucky, state school smart ass.
Yeah.
Like every good thing was knocked back the first time. I'll tell you what, I'll go and try work for a year. Yeah, I'm still trying work as it stands. So, and being an absolute joiner and someone that always is looking to fix things that maybe aren't broken. I did a few things, fell in with a company, a family business that 22 years later, I saw an exit from, and I was leading it by then. So I climbed the greasy pole, headed up the sales. This was a industrial consumables distribution business when I got involved. By the time I finished, it was a manufacturing business that had arms in training and power electronics manufacturing and a whole bunch of other fun stuff that we'd done pretty much through M&A. When, as sales director, I realized that it was kind of Sisyphon trying to push the ball uphill every day and eke out, 3-4% annual growth in a mature market. And looked around one day in a moment of ascension, maybe accidentally, and realized that I was in a market where there's lots of retirement age business owners who didn't necessarily have a succession plan. And so we started acquiring. Absolutely ballsed up the first one, as you do.
But way to learn, isn't it?
Had the temerity to try again, and the support of the chairman, he was the MD at that time, to try again. And then 8 of those later, we built a lovely group, which we exited to one of the Nordic permanent holdcos.
Oh, right.
Back in 2019, and then 2021, I finally exited because I couldn't leave them in COVID, not in good conscience. My son was born and I started looking. I had to scratch the itch, got into tech, probably at the wrong time, 2021, right at the top of the toppy bull market. Spent the last 4 years in tech and the venture scene, and then had the desire to get back into mature value creating businesses, which wasn't at all to do with the flip to a bear market economy and the move from growth stocks to value stocks, not at all. But I'm that easily influenced. Anyway, my friend Adam and I, who had also had an exit, he'd sold his company to Just Eat, decided we wanted to go out and start buying some traditional businesses. So we formed Coefficient Capital, which is our little search fund project that's currently at heads on a deal, which will be our first, which is exciting. And then this was 2.5 years ago, where do you find the businesses? If you're not in this space, where do you find them? And BizCrunch was born from that, which we'll hopefully get onto.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you're in that previous role, how many and what period was it that you were acquiring, and how many businesses did you acquire?
Yeah, we did 8, and then I did another post-exit, which was a foray into buying a pre-pack off of FRP or through FRP, which was they were brilliant, but Christ, that process nearly killed me.
Yeah,
but there we are. Interestingly, now that acquired entity is probably one of the jewels in the crown of the group that I built, and we picked it up for. Probably the lowest I've ever paid.
Really?
Well, of course, it was a asset purchase at pence in the pounds, wasn't it? So, but so we did 8 sort of typical acquisitions, and then one esoteric, should you say? So that we were doing one a year, I guess. Or at one point, I think we did 2 in 1 year. So, yeah.
And how did you? So I suppose this was before your shift towards the ETA sector and establishing Coefficient Capital. How were you originating that? Was that broker led? Was it proprietary? Was it industry contacts?
Exactly that. Yeah. And hence me being a sort of fish out of water when I thought I could go back and do that again and realise, well, if you're agnostic of the sector and the industry and you're not immersed in it, and you don't have the contacts. And frankly, I didn't want to go back. The reason I'd left the industry is because I'd had 20 odd years in it and felt I needed a change of scene. So Adam and I had our plans as to which industries we wanted to look for, particularly blue collar service driven industries. I think the first word out of his mouth was HVAC, which obviously, the industry contacts was how we did it, or how I did it when we were in the in the fabrication space. Yeah.
And so that's where you've now found that actually it seemed, I suppose origination probably seemed much easier as a trade buyer, industry contacts. And you thought, well, this is great. I'll just go and do that. And then you find actually when you're, two individuals without an existing trading business in a particular sector trying to acquire things, actually it's a lot harder, one, to originate, and two, also, I suppose, the credibility piece is more challenging.
Oh, couldn't have said it better. Yeah, I mean, once you've done one acquisition in a space, chances are you can't set foot into an exhibition hall without people wanting to take you to one side and have a chat about the future of their business, which is nice because it almost compounds, right? But if you've got the cold start problem, the blank canvas problem, where it's like, well, who's going to be the first over the line here, and where do I look? If you're not known, that's a real barrier to entry, I'd say. So it was quite humbling.
Yeah. Okay. And so instead of push along using what there is, proprietary outreach, going to brokers and just kind of fighting your way through, you thought, hang on a minute, I can solve this problem.
Yeah.
And
or we can try to, at least.
Okay. And founded BizCrunch.
Yes, that was so Adam, having built a tech business and sold it to Just Eat, was the sort of driving force of there must be a tech solution for this, and was busily looking and trying to join other bits of tech together to sort of make it happen. And the frustration was you just couldn't. Desks. So the reason that traditional search pays a stipend for for people to spend 2 years getting a deal over the line is because the first 6 months you are trying to build your database and trying to get the flywheel moving from overcome the inertia. Yeah. And we thought, well, that's very inefficient, frankly. So he was the advocate for, well, let's build something. There's got to be a way of doing this. I'd, through my angel investing, had invested in a startup that had built some technology that would make that process a lot easier in terms of ingesting PDFs and XML files from company's house, and then in almost real time from the moment they're filed, turning them into data points that can be stuck into a database. So that we leveraged that, that got us going. And a year later, we had a product that we could actually bring to what we thought would be private equity. And in all fairness, search and ETA as terms to us back then were foreign.
Yeah. So that I suppose that leads us on neatly to, how did you first hear about, entrepreneurship through acquisition, search funds, these people who are coming out and acquiring businesses. What was it that led you to that?
Well, they're prolific in the US, right? So, you can't fail to trip over stories of small businesses being brought out for succession in the States. It wasn't necessarily on our radar that it would be a sort of industry with its own glossary of terms, etc. here. So we came to it largely through learning about how it was done in the States. We knew we wanted to buy small businesses. We wanted to look at deal structures and funding options, and all of the kind of content about it was proliferating out of the US. It's only really Simon Webster that's been the kind of proponent that got the whole thing started here. And we didn't attend LBS, so we didn't get access to that information. So it was very US-centric in terms of the learnings. And then we had to sort of recalibrate it to, there is a burgeoning UK scene. But then as we started, so we launched BizCrunch, and it naturally attracted searchers because we were in, you can't fail to be in some of these like collaborative mastermind groups where it's like, hey, let's do some deal sharing, which I think have got an amazing place, and there should be more of them, frankly. But everybody that gets a tip on where you can go to find opportunities is thankfully it's quite collaborative. They share it. So we kind of started to just through word of mouth get searchers approaching us saying, "Oh, can I try this?" And we're like, "Well, maybe we should productize it."
Yeah.
So it was almost accidental that it became niche focused around UK search and ETA. But we're so glad it did, because the more we've dug into it and the more we've spoken to our users and our friends now in this space, the more we've realized they've got multiple pains that need solving in order for this, to be more efficient, search to be more efficient and rewarding.
So just to clarify, had you already decided that you wanted to acquire businesses,
yes,
the two of you,
yes,
before you kind of identified?
Yes, but we thought we would be private equity.
Yeah.
That's what we thought.
There's a lot of people I talk to who sort of say, well, I suppose I was a searcher, but I didn't know I was a searcher, and that's really interesting. So
we'd very much ruled out the chance of a zero money down kind of acquisition, because we'd seen that companies that go for that kind of deal structure are normally distressed, and we didn't really want to go buy distressed. We had some capital from our respective exits, so we wanted to do a fair exit. But the big challenge was where do we start? But we did not know that we would be searchers in the sense that we know them now.
Yeah. So I suppose you were accidental searchers, or you were searchers and you didn't know it, and then you created this BizCrunch product that helped with origination and data, that also kind of coincidentally led searchers to you as well.
Correct.
Any scent of an origination source for people who are out there, not desperately, but very seriously looking to make an acquisition as quickly as they can, will naturally, come queuing up for a product like BizCrunch.
Well, that's the dream.
Yeah. Yes. And so there was a point then, I suppose, where you pivoted BizCrunch, did you, to focus a bit more on the searchers?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can't boil the ocean and try and serve everybody. You can't fight a war on multiple fronts, right? So having learnt some lessons from working in a venture studio, venture builder, I realized that niche was definitely the way to go. So, the niche that looked like it had the most need for solutions is search. And because lots of, venture capital is invested in companies that provide solutions to the higher end, tier one PE funds and the venture funds themselves, right? They've got lots of software solutions, whereas search has been somewhat neglected. It's very much still a very traditional offline or very heavy desk research intensive process.
Yeah.
And so we thought, well, look, we can digitally transform some of this. And these are the folks that need it most. So it was the blue ocean theory, if you will, at that point. And not to mention the fact that we were motivated by the fact that we'd ingested some angel capital. So, we needed to sort of mature the product into something that could scale and could be easily explained, and that there was going to be potentially a growth engine from it, a predictable one, because we all try to get to that product market fit. And if you're trying to do everything for everyone, that's not going to happen. So, hence the niche.
Yeah, makes sense. And so I suppose there are other platforms,
Of course.
BizCrunch, from my understanding, does a bit more than many of the other platforms, certainly ones I've seen. What is the product niche? Why would someone use BizCrunch as well as or instead of an alternative?
Yeah, great question. And we tried them all. And if we could have used them and accelerated our search, then we would have. But many of them are credit referencing tools. Most of them at the time had no estimated revenue or EBITDA for unaudited account size companies. So the sort of sub 10 million, sub whatever it is, 350K of assets. You'll know better than me. But so if you were in a black box, if you wanted to explore that particular niche of sub 10 mil rev, so it's caveat emptor, isn't it? It's poking around in the dark. So we found that was a frustration. Also, it's all very well finding something via SIC code, although SIC codes are awful, and more to follow on that. But it's all very well finding companies in your search lens. Then how do you find who owns them? And how do you reach those people who own them? And how do you start a sensible discussion? So we wanted to augment not just financial data, but ownership indicators, ownership data. So how you could reach the people of significant control, if you like. We wanted to programmatically omit out all of those kind of complex structures. So, if this is actually nested within a holding company, is that really going to be a viable target, or do you just want independently owned businesses? What about businesses that have got owners that have been in it for 25 years and are nearing retirement? All these indicators just weren't there in any of the competing platforms. Yeah. So we had to emphasize those, because those are the things, how motivated is the seller likely to be? How narrow can I make my search? Because I don't want to be sending letters out at, £1.50 a go to all these people and spamming their mailboxes where, there's no actual fit. So we wanted, conversely, whereas some of our competitors want to sell you lots and lots and lots of rows of data, we wanted to sell you really relevant data to your search that was going to get you a higher chance of success and therefore bring down the amount of time you were going to be spending searching, arguably, so you could perhaps consider self-funded instead of traditional and come away with more equity. Yeah.
Well, it's a very compelling argument. Here's the question. Does it work?
Yes, it does. It's certainly got 300 odd users. I think 15-20% of them pay us regularly for access to the data, which is nice. We've had, I think, 9 deals that our members or our users have completed as a consequence of finding data through BizCrunch, which is always very validating. Yeah. So yes, I'm never happy. So my hesitance is it's never perfect, right? So the pursuit of perfection is somewhat futile, but I'm up for that fight. Yeah. So I mentioned SIC codes, for example, right? So SIC codes are a blunt instrument. So our search is geographical and financial, but also industry based on SIC. We hate that. So we've been busily using AI in the background to munch through all of the domains that. So one of the first steps we did was, in addition to finding all of the ownership information we started augmenting company information like co-reg number with website domain, because actually no one had joined those dots really to be able to say this co-reg number is such and such.co.uk. Yeah. Which actually unlocks a whole load of possibilities, because once you do that, you can actually then go and augment some data. We've sent some scraping and interpretation software out to, we got 485,000 records in our database of what we deem to be independently owned, material, 1 million plus acquirable businesses, right? Oh. So we've taken your 5.7 million of all these SPVs, et cetera, that are out on Companies House, and we've just gone, there you go. These are the ones to focus your time on. Already that's valuable. But then within that, SIC codes obfuscate the process. So let's go and make that process easier. So we've built using ISIC v4, which is the international standard industrial class, which is 10x more granular than SIC. Okay. We've used some LLMs and some scraping stuff to basically interpret from the websites of these companies what they do, and then give them more relevant classifications and a nice paragraph or so of prose that you can keyword search across. Yeah. So that for us is game changing. That launches probably by the time this podcast goes live. Okay. Actually. So excellent. That was wholly in response to user feedback. Like, this is great, but I'm getting dentists where I want fertility clinics, or I'm getting domiciliary care where I want care homes, or that kind of thing, right?
Because it was just too broad on
the SICs are just massive, right? So, but the ISICs are specific to the particular role, and a keyword search or a phrase search is always going to get you better results. So we want our searchers to find relevant things, relevant companies, relevant targets more rapidly.
You mentioned, actually, does this help you to do a deal more quickly and therefore enable you to more people to do it in a self-funded way and therefore retain more of the equity, which is commonly how it will.
Well, that's probably my ideology. Being I'm nothing against traditional search funds, and actually I know a number of really competent, excellent searchers who have chosen to go the traditional model because they want the mentoring and the advice. I'm filled with hubris, so
But do you see more self-funded people on the platform?
Yeah. So we see a lot of independent sponsor type approaches where individuals are looking to do deals. I would say the traditional search funds are still in the minority.
I think there's probably fewer of them as well in the UK at the moment.
Yes, although I'm seeing a new one every week. I guess you are too.
Yeah, there's lots more coming in, but I think it's the time to get into operating your traditional search fund obviously takes far longer than self-funded.
Two sides of the problem, haven't you, to solve?
You leave your job and self-funded. The next day you are a self-funded searcher. You decide that you want to become a traditional searcher. You leave your job. You then go through 6 months or more raising your search capital and so on. And you have to build a PPM and everything before you can even start your search.
Exactly.
And of course, you start in the meantime, but you're not fully formed and ready to go. So I guess that probably is a contributing factor at least. And just going to the point of it is a very interesting point that you identified that the process of search is incredibly manual, hands-on and time-consuming, and in I guess reducing the amount of human time involved there actually should make it more efficient.
In this day and age, with the digital tools kit available these days, what a time to be doing any large project, if you will, because that you can do a lot of the heavy lifting using digital tools. So we felt it was a bit of an anathema or a contradiction that search is taking people 2 years when there is an abundance of motivated retirement age sellers. So our data tells us that there's about 75,000 of those 485,000 where the all of the PSCs are north of 60. Right, so there's 75,000 likely material, acquirable, motivated seller businesses. Why would it take 100 search funds each 2 years to get one over the line? That doesn't compute. It must just be these obstacles to sieving for gold, if you like.
And I think that's one of the points I was going to come on to, which is I can understand the manual process of identifying a potential target can and possibly should be reduced, made more efficient. What the next stage is, and I think this does take time, is developing a relationship. Often these founders, perhaps if they're in their 60s, maybe 70s, and have founded and run this business for several decades, and it really is their baby and their life. And, in terms of succession, what is important to them, hopefully, is that they want to identify the right person to take on their business and run it and take it on to the next level. And I think that bit often necessarily takes time. But
often overlooked, the relationship build piece, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Particularly where you're going off market.
Yeah.
I mean, where you've got a motivated seller that's engaged a broker and then obviously has delusions of grandeur. But once they come back down to earth again, and then there is this kind of more accelerated process to I'm mentally 1 foot out the door, so trust is less important to me. But if you are in the back of your mind worried about succession and thinking what's going to happen to my legacy and my team and that kind of thing, but yet you're maybe not ready, you haven't engaged any process formally to start selling your business, and someone hits you with a, out of the blue, let's have a chat, that the nurturing of that relationship cannot be underestimated. It cannot be rushed. And it's still, I think, searchers find that out the hard way where they push too hard and, people take their playing piece off the board because they don't want to be rushed.
Yeah.
And so there is that element, you're right. That is dictating some of the time, but that still shouldn't be 2 years.
Yeah.
You can build a relationship in 6 months.
Yeah. And I suppose if there's a piece of the puzzle here, that bit, say, that can't be rushed, it's even more important to speed up the other bits, right? The bits that you can.
We want to get to that bit early.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Leave your job, become a self-funded searcher, and start building relationships with 150, candidate companies. On the basis that maybe 20% of those might actually get to a serious discussion that meets your timeline and meets your deal structure and your sector specificity. So get to that bit. That's what we want to power search to do: is get to the fun stuff early.
Yeah.
Because what do we have right now? It used to be 1 in 3 searchers would drop out. So it was 2 out of 3 would get successfully through to an acquisition. Now, I think globally it's now 1 in 2. So the odds of success are already maybe it's tracked to the macroeconomy. I don't know, but they're less. So what can we do to help reverse that?
Yeah, and also a topic that keeps coming up in conversations I'm having at the moment is resilience. And actually, I think if you can reduce the number of businesses that are just not relevant that you end up having to talk to and spend time on, it's going to mean that you can spend more time on more meaningful conversations and probably benchmark more quickly as well, because they're all going to be at least a certain threshold of relevance. And so that hopefully will mean that, there's less fatigue in terms of, repeat conversations and then keep finding out, actually, this isn't the one and moving on.
I talked about Sisyphus earlier, didn't I, with, organic sales. But it speaks to tenacity, right? That resilience piece speaks to motivation. And so, it's like a fundraising process. You're getting told no 400 times. Do you become less likely to ask the 401st person, or is it a special kind of someone that's galvanized by that negativity?
I think it definitely is.
It is.
I think it is. And we've had guests on the podcast before who demonstrate that very well. I think one of the things hopefully that what BizCrunch is doing can help to solve is at least narrow down those conversations, so there's fewer that are just very early on, this is a waste of time, we need to move on.
And so that's why it's evolved beyond search. So as a data provider, that was where we wanted to make our first foray. That was the sort of low-hanging fruit that we thought we could help solve some of the pain. But it just uncovers more pain, right? You realise that there's a whole process, a whole flow that's being followed here, and none of it's massively efficient, right? There's obstacles at every turn for a searcher, and that resilience piece. Well, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. Hey, welcome to search. You're going to get punched in the face on a daily basis, right? Pre and post the deal, frankly. So if we can help to not just provide the candidates, but get those candidates talking to you, that's where we've next taken the product. So there's a whole outreach feature now where you can export the data from your search results and stick it straight into an email drip campaign and a letter campaign, and get your word out to these people and start pushing people into your deal pipeline. And then we have a whole sort of Kanban deal tracker thereafter, which goes, you've had a positive reply to this. Now let's start going down the funnel of moving to offer and heads and SPA, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
So we're really trying to become almost like a full operating system for search. That would be ideal for us.
Yeah, amazing. Really interesting.
And that's obviously what we've raised venture capital for. So.
Yes, yeah. So you definitely need to work on that then.
Yes, we probably should deliver on that. Right?
That's it. Cool. So, and so just to turn to your experience as well, obviously you said in your background at the beginning, that you have operated a business with funding, with PE backing.
Not initially. I mean, we sold it, and I stayed around.
Yeah.
And yes, the culture was different. But go on.
But it was before that. It was privately owned. Was it family owned?
Yes,
said?
Absolutely. Yeah. So that was the watershed moment, if you like. The chairman and other shareholders and directors shareholder directors that wanted to retire at that point did. I said, I'll stick around. There was a contingent earnout, small. We'd mitigate that as best as we can, and the acquirer was incredibly supportive and realistic, and we smashed it.
Good.
But it was important that we weren't all out the door. So from a seller's mindset perspective, I wanted to be the continuity. And so, there was an extra 2 years that I was with them working under a PE ownership, which was, I loved it, frankly.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Cool. I loved the structure and the reporting obligations and the wider stakeholder group to sort of pitch things to and receive insights from other businesses around the group, and absolute mind opening. But had spent 20 years in our vacuum chamber talking at most to other businesses that were either competitors or customers or suppliers. So you didn't get the same broader perspective that you get from being part of something bigger.
Yeah, I suppose there is that risk of being in a privately owned family business for a long period of time. Not things are done the way they're done, and you kind of it's very easy to kind of be a bit blinkered in that. Well, this is the way we do things, without having other people coming in and saying, well, why do you do it that way? And of course, to some extent, you try to have that open mindset yourself, but having other people come in and just challenge you a little bit, I suppose, is probably what then made you think, wow, there's a different world out there, right?
100%. I think the company needs to be ready for that change, right? And the leadership need to be that open-minded, right? To be coachable and seek counsel, both from above and below in terms of the reporting line.
Yeah.
So, we culturally set out to welcome, bottom up contributions of ideas and solutions, and challenge, do we still need to be doing these things this way? But, I see a lot of businesses where challenging is not really invited. And that will inevitably lead to that sort of J-curve post-acquisition, where people are coming in and, needing to optimize and make change, and there will be innate, almost like trained in change resistance, because it's not been encouraged. So that's something to look for, and you don't get to really pick that up in due diligence. I always say the real due diligence begins the moment the SPA is dry.
Yes, yeah. You learn about it. It's a bit like passing your driving test, isn't it? You learn to drive once you get behind the wheel. That's it.
And you might smash a couple of Armcos on the way down the M1.
Yeah. Okay, so well, that's interesting. So you really enjoyed the PE experience.
I did.
And then ultimately, came out and decided to go a different path, acquire some businesses, although you were going to be a PE and outfit.
Oh yeah, I was a multi-asset capital allocator. Yeah. Oh Christ, yeah. Me armed with my little. I think I had 7 or 8% equity by the time we exited. So I'm not sure it was a new life exit, but it certainly was a new house exit. But I was Captain Capital. I was out there going, I'm going to do some angel investing and buy some businesses. Big dreams and all that. But time is, particularly also with this, you've got one recently, new baby.
Yeah.
that was an interesting challenge to focus on the things that actually really matter.
But so it's, I suppose, a nice time to be able to take some time out and spend that time and with the family. But then you really enjoyed the PE experience. But I would say that the ETA world is very different.
Oh yes.
And so what made you decide that was more of interest than perhaps going in as CEO in another PE-backed business? Or was it just the fact that you were going to acquire these things, kind of found your way almost accidentally into the world of search, and it's gone from there?
Yeah, we wanted to be majority owners of something, Adam and I. So I think we'd both been parts of teams sharing equity out across a lot of heads, and that was cool. But I think we wanted to build sort of a permanent asset base, if you will, with some cash flowing assets that we owned the lion's share of. But also, I really enjoy that process of we're walking in day one to meet the team of a business you've just acquired, and you're probably going to get roasted, but it's that complete unknown. You can do as much of preparation as you like, but you've just got to go in with this, can-do spirit and openness, and do your best. And that's really galvanizing, really almost addictive after you've done it a few times.
Yeah.
So I was kind of missing that.
Yeah.
And hence the small business kind of like, let's not go and buy something go back into the kind of corporate structure. Let's go and do stuff that's JFDI, roll your sleeves up, rapid, agile iterations on a theme. That didn't work, try something else. Yeah. That's fun.
Yeah, got it. No, completely with you there. Okay, and so now you are very much in the ETA space, both with BizCrunch and also, looking at some acquisitions together with Adam, what have you found about the UK search market? I mean, I know you mentioned the US, and obviously it's far more mature there. There's
mature is a good word.
There. Yeah, mature and efficient, I suppose.
Yeah.
But what are the issues
Let's
in
not
the
get
UK?
on the Lender Lament.
Well, that's it. Yeah.
What are the issues? Well, it is an immature. It's 30 years behind the States, largely because I think the SBA galvanized it in the US and really supercharged it with the 7A loan, and we have nothing like it. And I would say, if Rachel Reeves is going to Davos and going to China and trying to bang the drum for UK investment and growth, she could do worse than look at giving the BBB a mandate to offer something similar to the SBA 7A that actually concentrates on economic continuity of companies that otherwise might go into liquidation if they don't have a succession plan.
Yeah,
that's one way of sort of shoring up your lines before you look to go and dump a bunch of venture capital or pension money into the venture space like that. That is. The IRR on search is far better than all the other, alt asset classes that we talk about, and yet it's completely undervalued, if you like. So that needs working on. So funding, that's all I'll say on the matter. But until we get something like that, we are not going to supercharge this space.
We just on that point, actually, Gareth, about the IRR. I mean, IRR is one thing, but actually, as well, what we should be thinking about is the social good that is done, the jobs that are retained, the jobs that aren't lost by a company having no succession solution and instead just closing the doors and winding up.
Well, we've done some work on that, actually. So we've looked at, welfare costs per capita and average employment and size of SMEs. And we've estimated that it's about 160 billion cost to the Treasury in terms of lost corporation tax, lost VAT, lost PAYE, and then the increased welfare bill.
Of course.
160 billion per annum.
Wow.
If the companies that I think Shawbrook and the Institute of Corporate Finance Brokers, they did a survey last year.
Right.
Something like 45% of SMB owners that they interviewed were like, in the next 5 years I'm looking to exit my company. So let's just say that I think that come out about 340,000 companies or something if you prorata that. Okay. Now, not all of them will really do it, but let's just look at. I think they said of that there's like another 70% within that 45% who have no internal succession plan by their own admission, right? Yeah. So if they MVL, right, members voluntary liquidation, instead of actually having an ongoing succession, right? The huge loss to the country is immeasurable. It makes Rachel Reeves's 22 billion black hole look like a red dwarf. It's by comparison to this, and nobody is talking about it. It's not made the government sort of dossier. The Small Business Commissioner. Actually, Liz Barkley is aware and is championing the cause, but that's about as far as we can get this message, picked up by government. But if there was ever a galvanising reason to put in place a proper finance structure that was, UK PLC underwritten for succession, that's it.
100%. And the thing is, a lot of these businesses, sadly, have probably got people in the business that are capable of running them, but just don't have the financial knowledge or acumen to instigate an MBO before the doors are closed?
Yeah, agreed. Or are often excluded from the inner mindset of the shareholders.
Yes,
and therefore aren't maybe deemed. I've looked at there's a deal recently that's come across our desk where the sellers kept the leadership at arm's length, if you will, just on options for a protracted period of time. And then one day said, right, we're pulling the trigger. And the leadership were like, well, we're executing this strategy. And what's going to happen now? Well, we're selling. So up to you. Now, the sensible thing to have done, but it might have been to say, well, hey, look, let's have a conversation with the leadership. Let's help you go out and raise some capital to buy me out.
Yeah.
But I see that time and time again, is that, look, I hired you when you were 18 and you're still with me at 36. But you're still the kid I hired at 18, and so you couldn't possibly run my business. This is far too big and grown up for you.
Yeah.
And that pervades that mindset. Unfortunately, is quite common.
Yeah, it's terrible. But yeah, look, I mean, hopefully all we can do is keep banging the drum and hoping that the government will provide some level of support.
Meanwhile, the debt's one side of the equation, but equity finance is another, right? And one thing that could be solved maybe sooner is bringing more alternative investors, if you will, people that like to invest in venture and a patient capital that don't mind not seeing their money back or even all of their money back until sort of 10 years' time. What have you explored this, which generates upwards of 32.5% IRR pretty consistently with defined exit criteria, etc. I think there's a job to be done to bring search as a asset class to a wider investor network. That would galvanize the space and solve the problem, I think. Because at the moment, you see it every day. We speak to these searchers, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, who maybe get round the 5 or 6 people in the UK that are regularly advertising themselves as search fund investors. And hear the, I'm over-allocated kind of response, and then have to go to Spain or America or Switzerland to find capital. And yet, we are sitting on how much dry powder? And there's how many LPs that are, busily deploying capital into venture almost futilely.
Yeah, I mean, and I can tell you how many cap tables I've seen, but
same faces,
probably 50 or more, and and I'm talking about UK deals only, and I've never seen one wholly filled with UK investors. Always they're in the minority. Mostly it is in the UK, probably mostly Spanish. Always US people in there, and 1 or 2 sort of notional UK investors because you feel like you should have some local investors, but they're just, the people aren't
many
investing.
of them.
There aren't, and the crazy thing is, it's a great asset class. Obviously, we know that.
It almost struck me as like people just keeping this a secret.
But I think there is an element of that. There is an element of that. Search internationally, I mean non-North America, has had rapid growth in the last few years. Prior to that, it was traditional search only and then MBIs, effectively. And obviously MBIs were not very well looked upon by lenders or sellers or brokers. And traditional search really was retained amongst a small group of, the search fund investment mafia, right? Who invest in stuff. And there's been a massive evolution because now there's lots of new funds coming in, particularly in Spain, and in the UK now. Thankfully, there's 1 or 2, but there's still not enough. So I think there's a very distinct lack of knowledge about it. I think there's also 2 aspects to investment decisions. Equity gaps on transactions. People can look at a company and say, well, I understand that company makes widgets, and I can look at the P&L and I can say yes or no if I want to invest based on the terms being put forward. I think certain types of investors prefer to see that. It means that they haven't got to get their head around the speculative nature of search capital. Because
so you think bring them deals when they're more defined rather than speculative,
equity gap deals rather than traditional search capital investment, because otherwise there's a whole extra level of understanding where people have to say, well, hang on, so there's this person here who's just come out of business school, has never run a business before.
Wants me to take a huge risk on them for 2 years.
400 grand to just go off and try and find a business to run that they may or may not find, and then if they do find something, then they'll come back and ask me for more money to invest. Well, I'd rather just wait until I can see the company. So, of course, there's some fantastic economics in investing in traditional search.
You're getting some risk mitigation through your step up, etc. But
it just takes an effort of understanding the process and reconcling in your mind.
It's esoteric.
Yeah, exactly. So I think there's a number of reasons, but whatever they are, it to me it seems crazy that there aren't more people putting money into this, because it's a fantastic.
You're totally right though. Bringing deals to life. I mean, I love what Moonbase are doing. And that's really kind of democratizing access to sort of lower mid market and below PE. I love what the Beach Equity guys are doing. On a sort of per deal basis, bringing exited founders that have got capital to deploy into a space like this.
Yes,
great. There just isn't enough of those out there that are connecting, people with capital to allocate to great search opportunities that, have real deals that, just need that equity gap filling to get it over the line. So I'd love to be able to solve that problem at some point. But we've got lots in front of us at the moment
lots of other things
with evolving BizCrunch. So I think finance on both sides of the coin in terms of debt and equity is an inhibiting factor in the UK search. Also, I think the network isn't big enough. It's not grown sufficiently. Like, you've got lots of people deal sharing in the States and lots of collaboration, and we don't have enough of that yet. And I think more power to that kind of exponent, really, if people that have got deals that they maybe have passed on, but that are perfectly good deals just don't fit within their thesis. Some sort of forum in which to pass them on to others, I think, could expedite the space as well.
And there's also searchers who, traditional searchers who are going to acquire one business only, and go in and run it. And they've got a funnel of potential deals. They find the one that they end up doing, move in as CEO, and possibly forget about the funnel that they've built because, well, it doesn't matter now. They've done what they wanted to do. I'm sure in some cases they'll share those, but actually, having some sort of place for them to be deposited and say, well, look, this is as far as I've got on all of these. I've qualified these. I've spoken to these individuals. Sharing those deals as well would be, super beneficial. I think a lot of the concerns that I see searchers have is that they feel very alone when it comes to the origination piece. There's challenges obviously with brokers because
How long you got?
Right, quite. So there are some challenges with them as well. And the proprietary piece is hard work and very time consuming. So anything to accelerate origination is obviously going to help.
Yeah, I completely agree. And creating that collaborative, forum is something that we think we can do. You get enough searchers together, in a community, if you will, and hopefully you can foster that kind of collaboration. That's the dream.
So, Gareth, BizCrunch, you're working on some transactions as well. What else have you got in the pipeline that you're working on?
Well, my wife tells me too much, but. I'm very keen to make sure that we leave a dent in this space. That we have a legacy. Maybe I've reached that certain point in age where it's more about the mission than it is about the reward financially and all that sort of stuff. So I'm very keen to see search evolve and mature, and largely for that sociological and economic continuity reason, because I think search is the answer to the problem of succession in SMBs in Western economies. Yeah. So I want to have played my part in helping that to become more efficient, but also to help bring together all these folks that are going through this same pain and maybe aren't necessarily communicating and talking and that sort of stuff. So one thing we're doing is participating in hosting the Serial Acquirer Symposium in June over in Marylebone. So that's bringing together a couple of hundred self-funded searchers, traditional searchers, holdco operators, lower mid-market PE, and then all of the supporters and service providers that work with that space, as well as some keynotes around your first 100 days and change management and finance deal structuring, and hearing some panels from people that have walked this journey and come out the other side. So it will be hopefully a super useful day for people to be able to get some knowledge and download the experience of others to help kind of supercharge their own searches. So that's happening on the 18th of June. Serialacquirer.uk is the domain where you can read more about it and book your day pass. But we're really excited about that, and welcoming anybody that wants to participate in contributing to that event from a content perspective or whatever. Just jump on the site and you can communicate with us there and express your interest.
Perfect. Sounds great. Yeah, sounds like a really interesting event, and I think there's not enough of these things happening in the UK. So yeah. So we always finish with asking the same question to every guest that we have on, and you can take this to be as broad as you like or as narrow into the world of search as you like, but who has taught you the most on your journey?
Goodness. Well, I've got a hat tip to my dad because, I wouldn't be where I am without his counsel over the years. Kept me on the straight and narrow, and has been a great avatar or role model. If I can, be half as the success that he is, then I'll have done all right. But I think from an understanding of capital allocation and finance and leadership. You know, there's probably a world of people who have passed into my life and left their mark, and that I've been proud to have said I know them. Probably one of which is Jurek Sukowski, who I worked with at Henley Business Angels. So he's one of the professors at Henley Business School, absolute mine of information, worked in the pharmaceutical industry, had numerous exits under his belt, was still going at like 80 odd years old. He's tremendous, an absolute tour de force, and one of the nicest gentlemen you'll ever have the chance to meet. And then I would say similarly about Peter Rowlands, who was the gentleman who ultimately acquired the business that I ran, who I learnt an awful lot from, not just in how, to navigate the world of being private equity owned, but just how to, no matter how much you think you're putting your people first, you can always do more. You can always, and you can see tangible results from, reaching down and paying it forward and, cultivating people on their own career paths. So, true leaders make new leaders. And I think he lives that mission, and I try to do the same. Perfect.
Okay. Gareth, thank you very much for coming on. It's been a really interesting conversation. I don't think we were too controversial.
No, I'm disappointed in myself. I have to bring it back, and we'll have to get more into lending.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we're going to talk about brokers and lenders next time, and then we'll have plenty of outtakes. So, really enjoyed having you on. Thank you very much, and all the best of luck with progressing with BizCrunch and the acquisitions and all the other things you're looking at, and the Symposium, of course. So,
thank you, Carl. No, it's been an absolute pleasure. Really enjoyed talking to you as always.
Don't forget to follow us on Instagram at Found and Funded Pod and LinkedIn at the Found and Funded Podcast, and comment who you'd like to see us sit down with next. If you have any questions about what we've discussed today, drop me a message and let's have a chat.